Welcome to the 24K Life Podcast. I am your host, Derick Gant. And again, I have been blessed to be able to bring you someone incredibly unique, somebody incredibly experienced that has a great heart, a great mind, and a great opportunity to facilitate some knowledge and some information that we can share inside the 24K Life community. We're bringing you Kendall Layman. And Kendall is an executive leader who continually looks for ways to turn complexities. Does this sound familiar? I tell you the same thing, to turn complexities of business and life into simpler solutions. The key is to get those simpler solutions from a variety of sources on a variety of topics. With that, I want to introduce you to Kendall. Hey, Kendall.
Hey, Derick. Thank you so much for the kind introduction.
Well, you know, I meet with each guest prior to inviting them on the show, and I got a really good vibe and a really good nature from you. And so I say those things, that intro, with honesty and trust and pride. So you deserved all of it.
Thank you very much.
So you started your journey in the United States Air Force.
I did.
And how was that? I mean, I've never been in the armed services. Is it like the movies or
Well,
not so much?
I'll tell you, for me, it was a little bit different. So I actually left high school and started in college, a little bit non-traditional in the sense that I worked full time and went to school at night.
Oh,
Then I got married while that was still going on and just felt like I was spinning my wheels. So I was 20, 21, almost 22 years old when I went in the United States Air Force.
wow.
So I'm the old guy going in with all of the guys coming right out of high school. But I can tell you from what you've seen in the movies, after about the first 3 days, I was wondering what I had got myself into. And they were taking what I would consider a grown man compared to some of the kids I was with to my knees, wondering, how can I get out of this? I don't know that I want to do this. But it was a fantastic experience. I will always give credit to the United States Air Force for bringing discipline to my life, for making me start a task and finish it. And I'm not saying I didn't do those things, but they just made it very formal. And there's a process where they basically take you from a civilian and make you a soldier.
Gotcha.
And that's what they did, and they do it to everyone. And it's not there's no discrimination. We're all on the same path together, and it's really amazing when you look back and I see my life before and after, and I will always be grateful for that opportunity that I had.
Wow. Well, so let me ask you this question. So I was just talking to someone yesterday, and I was telling them what I believe about discipline. But so my question to you is that, do you look at discipline as a negative thing or as a positive thing?
Well, I mean, I guess it could be used negatively. For me, it's been very positive. And I've spoken to a lot of parents who have had children and kids who were leaving high school, and they might come to me and ask, hey, what do you think about my son or daughter going into the armed services? And I'm a supporter. You know, if someone does not have a clear direction of what they want to do in life, if maybe they don't want to go to college right away, maybe they don't have a trade picked out that they want to do, I am very supportive of the armed forces to give you that experience. You know, they're going to teach you a job, and many of those jobs can be used outside of the armed services. And so it's a great opportunity to go in and, if anything, learn to be on time at work and leave when it's time.
Professional development. I love
absolutely.
it. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I for me, discipline was very positive.
Yeah, I told the young man I was talking to yesterday, and he's about the same age as my son. I said, listen, man, they try and who knows who they are, but in general, the construct is discipline's a bad thing. I said, but discipline is freedom. I mean, when you know that you're going to get up and go to the gym every day, you're free. You don't have to worry. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to debate. You don't have to make a decision. You know you're going to get up at 4 o'clock and go work out.
That's right.
So he I saw his wheels turning, and so gave him a few examples. But in any event, so tell us about, you spent time in the government, you spent time at a small size company, and you spent time in a Fortune 500 company. So tell us about like those experiences. And when I say those experiences, I mean, based on where you are now, what would you do different? So did you have good experiences along the whole way? Did you decide that, hey, at this particular juncture, I need to kind of reconstruct? And that's why I wrote the book. See, I didn't tell him about the book yet. I'm kind of we're leading up to that, but go ahead.
I'm a firm believer, Derick, that every experience we have in life is an opportunity for us to learn. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were talking about the word stewardship. And they
Mm-hmm.
said, "Hey, what does that word stewardship mean to you?" And I said, we always think of that in a monetary term, usually when you talk about stewardship. But for me, I've looked at those experiences I've had in life, the military, going into different jobs outside of the military, and having some good experiences, some bad experiences in all of those. But those have all been given to me. And it's my job as a good steward of those to take care of those and to hopefully approach those with a positive attitude, that I maybe can take the learnings I've learned along the way and
Right.
share those with someone else that may be coming behind me, following along some of the same paths that I've been on. One of the big things that is uh, you just get to know outside of the military is, in the military, everything's taken care of. You go to the doctor, there's no bill after you leave the doctor. You just leave the
Good
doctor.
point.
You need a prescription. You just go to this little window over here and pick that up and walk out. And you kind of get used to that over time. And then all of a sudden you step out in the real world, and they tell you, okay, you're going to have this much taken out of your check for health care. You're going to have this taken out for this cost and everything. And all of a sudden you realize, where's all my money? I
Right.
don't have any money. That was a huge and rude awakening for me. And I guess if I could say anything, maybe a little bit of a warning would have been good. Leaving the Air Force, maybe somebody saying, "Hey, be ready for this."
Right.
Um, but really, everything has been pretty positive. I mean, there's always those times where you think, "Why am I going through this?" But usually later on down the road, you can look back and think, I'm pretty glad I did go through that, because it taught me some really, really good lessons.
Excellent. I like that. That's a great way to look at things. So in your early 30s,
Yeah.
you went to a party, an event, and you were talking to your uncle. So tell us about this event and tell us about your uncle.
Okay. So it was a family gathering, and you can call it a party, because my mom's side of the family, which my uncle is my mom's brother, is a large family. And my uncle had a pretty large farmhouse, and we would meet out there. And he has always been a very positive man. And I walked in one day, and he said, "Kendall, how you doing?" And I said, "I'm all right." And he said, "There's only two kind of days, good or gooder." And I've used that story all through my life. And the gooder part, of course, it's grammatically incorrect,
Of
but
course.
that's what makes it catchy. That's what makes you remember it. And I just used that little story, and then begin to think about, do we have a choice each day of how that day is going to go, and begin to develop this concept of the gooder life. What does that mean? And it's much more than just getting up each day and saying, okay, I've got a choice, good or gooder. It's much more than that. It's more of a filter of looking at your life. It's an opportunity to get up each day and just decide, do I want to be like I was yesterday, or
Mhm.
do I want to be better today than I was yesterday?
Right.
And that's really more what it's talking about. But as I began to think about it more and more over the years, and kind of develop the concept, I then began to realize, gosh, I've met a lot of people in my life, and I've been in places in my life where I didn't feel like making that decision each morning.
Hmm.
Getting up and being better, maybe I've experienced a tragedy or something, and that is just not what I want to do. And so I began to look at that and realize that sometimes being better today than yesterday simply means I got out of bed today. I got dressed today. There are people that are experiencing those struggles in life, and so therefore the concept of gooder developed into this whole thing of just try to be better today than you were yesterday, whatever that means for you at your time in life.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. So he was a huge influence in you being having that outlook. And then he asked you the question, and then it sparked this whole thought process. Now, how long did this concept mill around before you decided to turn it into a book?
Yeah. Well, that was you said in my early 30s, and I believe that's probably right. And so it was about 20 years later.
Okay.
Now, I spoke about it. I talked about it all through that time. And finally, just over the course of my career, learning different things, being under different leaders throughout my career, experiencing different things, it began to build up in my head. I've always been a note taker.
Hmm.
I write down in a book, and I was always one of those guys, and I'm sure a lot of people listening today will identify with this. You'll be in a job and you'll have a leader, and something will happen, and you'll say, "Man, if I'm ever a leader, I'm not going to do it that way."
Exactly.
Or I'm going to do it that way. And I did the same thing, and I kept notes. And over time, I thought, you know what? I've got so much of this in my head. It was more of I got to have some relief, and so I got to get this out of my head and onto paper, whether no one reads it or not. And so I finally did that. It took about 20 years to get it all together in my head. And what's funny is since that time, I've probably got that much more in my head because of talking to people like you
Right.
and other people. It's like I leave these conversations and think, wow, I never thought about that. If I'd have known that, I would have included that
Put
in the
that in the
book.
book.
And so now it's where I said after that first one, where it took me almost 2 years to write this, I'm not going to do this again. Now I'm thinking, I've got to do this again.
I gotta dump again.
I got to dump all of this out again. But Derick, it really comes down to I found a great publisher. It was a lady in McKinney, Texas, and I went down and told her my story, and we were sitting there, and I asked her, is this really anything? Am I just crazy here? And she said, no, I don't think so. But she said, Kendall, if I ask you this question, if you could touch one person from this work that you're going to do, would you do it? And I said, I would. And so that's the way I've approached this. When I
Okay.
go speak to people, when I talk on your show, Derick, if you and I change the life of one person today,
Right.
it's worth it. And that's the way I approach this whole concept and speaking and writing and everything.
Oh, that's awesome, and I agree with you. I think you're right. It was a lot. It's so funny because I had the same exact disposition. It's like I have so much of this information inside of my head. I want to help people, but I can't talk to everybody. And to try and figure out how to talk to everybody was very difficult. So you said, "Listen, let me just do what traditional people do, and let me dump this all in the form of a book." I asked my editor, I hired a professional editor and asked her the exact same question. Is this anything? I actually asked her, I said, hey, is this something that should be written in crayon for kids? Or do I have something that's, can taken very seriously? And she had edited some books for Dave Ramsey.
Oh,
Me being a financial guy, that was just like manna from heaven. Like, okay, so you really know what's like kind of going on from my writings. And she goes, no, I think you need to rearrange this, but I think
sure.
you have a lot of good information. So that's so cool because we had very similar conversations, very similar circumstances,
Right.
and hopefully, you've had great outcomes. So when you think about the gooder life and you think about, the work that you're doing in your group, um, how do most people benefit when they connect with you?
You know, um, Well, if anything, I hope that just like people listening to us today, I hope they're encouraged, and I hope they um, maybe approach tomorrow a little differently than they might have without listening to us. I recently read a book of a friend of mine who wrote it, and it's kind of changed my thinking on some things. Um, a lot of times we'll go to work each day and we will dread the day that's coming before us. Man, I don't want to do those jobs. I know I've got to do this, but I don't want to do this today. And I began to think about that. Um, that is just not really a good life to live.
No.
And I began to think that, if we approach each day as not about the work I'm going to do, but about whose life am I going to affect today. So when I come here to work, I'm going to interact with a lot of different people. I have a team that works for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's going on in the lives of any of those people. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But most of the time we come in the morning, we get going. Maybe something has happened that evening before. And the words that I speak to that person may be just the words that they need to hear.
Right.
So if we look at each day when we come into work or when we go about our life of how am I going to change somebody's life today? That may be as simple as being in the grocery store and seeing someone who needs a little help and saying, here, why don't you go in front of me? Maybe it's just that simple phrase that person thinks, there's still some good humanity in this world. And that's what they needed to kind of encourage them.
Right.
I don't know. It could be as simple as that. It could be bigger than that. But I just feel like if they read the book and if they put in their lives the principles that I talk about, I think it changes a person to look at life a little bit differently. And it's more about outwardly, how can I help people more than how can it help me?
Right.
It's going to help me anyway.
I was gonna say, isn't it cool though? Because when you help people, you feel better. It helps you. You feel like you're fulfilling your purpose
Sure.
on this planet.
Right. So I think that's really what it is. When I wrote the book, I told people I'm not going to be on the New York Times bestselling list. I know that's not going to happen.
Right.
I don't claim to be a great writer. I hope it's readable. But what I do tell them is this: the concepts and the content inside those front and back cover are solid. I may not say them the best way. And honestly, there's not a whole lot of new there. It's just coming differently. It's my way of saying it.
Absolutely.
But if you apply that to your life, I think it can absolutely change your life.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned some of the principles, or you mentioned that they follow the principles. Tell us a little bit about some of the principles that are in the book.
Yeah. So one of the big things I talk about in the book, first of all, I start off with what's called the life-changing moments. There was a story, and I do that on purpose because that kind of always sets a person on track for their life. Warwick Dunn was a running back, grew up in Louisiana, went to Florida State University, went on to play for Tampa Bay, set a bunch of records, and has started a foundation after he left pro football. But when he was a high schooler, his mother was a police officer, and she was shot and killed in the line of duty.
Wow. I did not know that. I
Yeah.
know Warwick Dunn, but I didn't know that.
Bobby Bowden at Florida State actually called him because he became the caretaker of his siblings at that point. And Bobby Bowden called him and told him, hey, if you need to get out of your commitment, stay there in Louisiana. And he said, no, sir, I've committed to you. I'm coming to you. Anyway, fast forward down the road, after his pro career, he decided he wanted to go to the prison and meet the man who was convicted for shooting his mom.
Really?
He did. And he went there, and there was a man with him who had been a writer, I believe, for Sports Illustrated or something, and had become a friend of Warwick's. And when they left the meeting, he looked at Warwick and he said, Warwick, I don't understand how you can do this. How do you go in and publicly face and have communication with the man who shot your mother? And he said, my mom always told us that in life we would face situations that would make us wake up one morning and go to bed that night and see the world differently. And that one did for me. And she said she always hoped that her children would either choose bitter or better. And she wanted them to choose better.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's kind of what we're talking about. And that's what I talked about in the book, because I had a moment like that in my life where you have to make a decision and it sets you on the road for how you're going to move on beyond that point. And so there are three things I talk about in the book that I call essential attitudes that kind of came from that experience in my life. And this is kind of the foundation. If you get nothing else in the book, if you can take these three essential attitudes and apply them to your life, I think it will change you. And that is being thankful, being humble, and being respectful. There have been times in my life where I've been down. And I'm not a down person. I'm kind of like my uncle. I'm that up guy all the time. But we all have those times. And what I found is that if I would spend time each morning or in the evening just writing down three things I'm thankful for, what it does, it's an exercise in perspective. When we begin to feel a certain way, we begin to focus inward and focus on ourselves and the problems we're having. But when we have to think about three things we're thankful for, it makes our eyes turn outward. And we think, okay, I'm thankful for this. I'm thankful for this. All of a sudden now I'm not thinking about myself for a few minutes. And it begins to pull our gaze outside of us. And so thankfulness will pull you away. Just being humble is recognizing that we're not here on this earth to see how important we can become, but instead to see maybe how many lives we can touch. And so, and then being respectful. We've always heard the saying, treat the janitor the same as you do the president in your company. I think this is something we've lost in our society recently. I don't know if it was you and I on our first talk, but talking about road rage and just things like that.
We did talk about that.
We did talk about that. And it's just not being respectful of the people around you. Drives me crazy. But how do we change that? We do it ourselves. And
100% right. I was susceptible to road rage, which is why we were talking about it. And I don't know if I told you what that one moment that changed my life was. I was racing to the hospital because not even my mom, but somebody called on behalf of my mom and said my dad was in the hospital. He had this accident and it was crazy. And I'm flying down the road and, and you're not making the best traffic decisions at that point. And, it might've cut somebody off and they were flipping me off and blowing at me. And I'm like, hey, I am so sorry, but I am going to see what I can, not that I can do anything for my dad, but I'm going. And that moment changed my life. It was like, I'll never do that to someone else because I have no clue.
That's right.
What they're going through, in that moment that they're mad. It may be something, it may just be who they are, but that's not for me to decide.
That's exactly right.
I actually learned to stop having it because I knew I was being a jerk with the driving, but I wasn't willing to stop doing it because I was headed somewhere vitally important for me because I didn't know if I was going to lose my dad. I was going to say goodbye, all those type of things.
Sure.
So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Have you heard, I heard this just recently, and it was a minister online that was saying it, but he was saying how, especially for us men, yes, we want love from our partner, from our spouse, from our wife, but more importantly, we need respect. And it really hit home. It's like there's, yes, you might love your partner, but respect is critical. And that really hit home for me too. So I can't wait to read that part of your book because I do think that that's vital. And I do think that it's something that we've lost over the years, or have become, less sensitive to it.
Yeah, I think so too. And speaking about our spouses, I've been married almost 40 years.
Congratulations.
Yes, sir. My wife and I, we know each other. I mean, we were friends before we got married. We were in high school together and been together ever since. And I think that's true. We speak differently. We've all heard about the love languages and all of that stuff like that.
Five love languages, yes.
But I mean, it's true. I mean, there are different things my wife needs from me. And I think I can see exactly what you're talking about, is that respect factor. That's just something we maybe as males just kind of need to build to build us up.
Right. Well, I've enjoyed this, man, and I'm going to make sure that I get a copy of The Gooder Life. And I hope that each and every person listening takes away those key elements, because you're 1,000% right. And if we can change one person's life, if we can hold the door, if we can say, "Wow, you look great today," or you know, and you don't even know the person's like, "I love your hair," you know,
Sure.
anything that comes from your heart, because people know when you're full of it.
That's exactly that's exactly right. No, hey, this is I can say this and people will say, "Oh, that's not true," but it's not about selling books. It's about getting a message out. I mean, I know that's why you're doing this show. There's a message that
100%.
you want to get. We are kind of, I'll use this word, we're kind of evangelists, and we have a message that we want to get out to people because
Right.
we're passionate about that message.
Exactly.
And that's what it was about. And that's why I love being on shows like yours. I love people taking the book. I just hope people will take the message to heart, and maybe it'll change their lives.
Well, I can promise you, and I won't say promise you, I will promise each and every listener that what he speaks is nothing but the pure, unadulterated gospel, because I did the homework. No, seriously, I did the homework before I wrote my book. And the average self-publisher, sells 250 copies of their book in their lifetime.
Yeah.
I've been blessed to sell, a couple thousand. So I haven't, so when I wrote the book, I knew I wasn't going to be a New York Times bestseller. And it's the same thing that you were just saying. But what I also knew is that, number one, I had to get it out because I was led to put this in print.
Sure.
Number two, I knew that whoever picked it up, whoever, even as a consultant, whoever may not have, millions of dollars for me to manage as an investment advisor, or, personal coaching, they couldn't afford a personal coaching fee, could pick the book up for less than, $25, or the paperback version for $14, and it could change their life.
Right.
And if they applied themselves, it would have maybe not just as good of an effect, but it have a really good effect. And so I know that you speak the truth. And even when you said, "Hey, I already knew it wasn't going to be, a New York Times bestseller," I didn't even do the Amazon bestseller thing. There's a whole thing of doing that. And I said, that's fine for people who want to do it. I personally wanted to finish the book. I wanted it to be a great book that would change people's lives. And I get the exact same vibe from you. And I hope that everyone, I'm going to put it up again. So for those of you that are listening, it is the gooderlifegroup.com. So it's not Good Life, Gooder Life.
Gooder. That's right.
.com. So go check it out. Go to the website, order the book. I'm sure it's an amazing read. I'm going to get a copy. I'm going to read it as well. And once I read it, I'm going to pass it on to someone else I think can benefit from it. So,
Great.
So be blessed, Kendall. Thank you so much. Give your wife a big hug and tell her that I appreciate her sharing you with us and the world. And I hope that we will get a chance to circle back and talk again soon.
All right. Thank you, Derick. Great time. Thank you.
You're so welcome. All right. So you heard it. The Gooder Life. I needed to know more about the Gooder Life. So when you listen to things like this and you're in your car, or you're in between, maybe you're cooking and it's playing in the background, these are the basic elements of life that makes life good. And if you're not applying these rules, these principles, these codes, these ideas to your life, how will you expect your kids to apply them? How will you expect your neighbors to apply them? And how are we supposed to be a better people together if we don't apply the Gooder Life principles? I'm Derick Gant. I'm asking that you share this podcast with others, share this YouTube video with others, because we all need to kumbaya a little bit more and road rage a lot less. Once again, I'm Derick Gant. Be your best, bring your best, leave nothing to chance. Have a great, great day.